All right, let's get started. Welcome, security pros, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on today's ESX webinar. The title of today's webinar, Coordinating Live Video Across the City from the Security Operations Center to the Field. We're excited about today's program. Today, we'll learn how Genetec and EIZO collaborate to deploy live video from the SOC to the field. These industry leaders utilize their innovative security solutions to enable the deployment of fully remote video walls. Security cameras within a facility, across multiple facilities, and the metropolitan area are consolidated within a security operations center where operators keep an eye for anomalies, dispatching guards when needed. By incorporating dynamic video decoding monitors into a unified security system, you open new coordination capabilities, from reassuring employees or customers that they are exiting a facility safely to raising suspicious activity to on-site security guards. Video decoding monitors provide real-time situational awareness from the centralized security operations center directly downstream. I'm Merlin Gilbo, the CEO of ESA, and I'm excited to lead this ESX webinar with our experts today. Before we dive in, I'd like to provide some tips for those of you joining us for your first ESX webinar. First, I'd like to remind everyone, if you're a leader from your company and value best practice sharing and networking opportunities, the ESA Leadership Summit will kick off in less than a month at the Dallas Cowboys World Headquarters in Frisco, Texas. This executive level education and networking event is where the industry's brightest minds take their teams to the next level. Discounted registration expires Friday. You can head over to esasummit.com for more information about this year's lineup of speakers. And if you're uncomfortable with travel, virtual passes with on-demand access to sessions are available. You'll be muted for the duration of this session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If a question or comment comes to mind at any point during today's webinar, click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and I'll ensure we save some time for your questions with our experts. We'll also be recording today's webinar so you can rewatch the on-demand session and share it with your colleagues. Tomorrow, you'll receive an email thanking you for your attendance today with a link to the recording. We at ESA realize your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time with us today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Brian Cote is the VP of Industrial, Military, and ATC Markets for EIZO. With a focus on identifying solutions to problems, Brian has been a thought leader and educator within the professional display market. Brian has been a guest lecturer on image quality and quality assurance at the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins. As a member of EIZO, Brian has been involved in developing new products and go-to-market strategies in security, healthcare, military, and geospatial imaging. Laurent Villeneuve is a product marketing manager for Genetec, with a focus on video management, infrastructure, and security of security. Laurent led educational seminars in many regions to raise awareness on privacy and cybersecurity. He manages go-to-market planning and marketing programs to further build brand equity and generate substantial business development for Genetec. Okay, gentlemen, the stage is yours. Let's dive in.
Great. Thank you very much, Marlon. Glad to be here, and thank you for all who are joining us today. So again, this is Brian Cote with EIZO, and I'll be walking us through the next few slides. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about the challenge of monitoring facilities remotely. We're going to talk about our joint offering, what the EIZO IP decoding solutions look like, and then how the Genetec unified platform, and then how it all comes together. So let's start off with the challenge I'm sure all of us have faced here. So within the traditional analog network, deploying live view was, I don't want to simplify it here, but was basically fairly simple, certainly compared to what we have to go through today. Essentially, you ran a coax cable to the location you wanted the video, you had the monitor, and a fairly simple solution. Deploying remote monitors in an IP infrastructure requires additional processing equipment, software, hardware in locations that are not always easy to get to or that you can't quickly support. And that means putting a lot of processing power on the edge of a network where you may not want people to have necessarily have access or easily touchable access by people you don't want on there. So that transition from analog to IP introduced a lot of great advantages. Right? And there's much more advantage than disadvantage, but there's always that one item that kind of slips through, and those spot monitors or PVMs are one of those things that created a little more difficulty when we went from analog to IP. So as a result, we saw a lot of users either give up on the spot monitor, where they started to deploy peripheral monitoring stations where they would have more people in more locations, meaning they were adding on a lot more costs, ballooning up the efforts. And it also made it harder to have context to the video. So when you remove those spot monitors, the PVMs, you no longer had that contextual information available to you. So a lot of this is what created a void in the market. So a solution has been developed. Wherever there is a need, somebody steps in with the solution, and we've had that now. So the EIZO IP decoding monitors provide really an elegant way. It brings back that ability to simply connect power, connect a cable. Everything's inside these monitors to receive the video, decode it, and display it. Everything's internal, so no extra hardware or software is needed. It's really about plugging in that power, plug in the network cable, and then all the remaining configuration, support, and maintenance is remote. So as an elegant of a hardware was, these devices still are essentially a device in the network. By working together with Genetec, users can now control the remote monitor through Security Center. This allows for that single platform and managing all the devices, all the solutions needed, further simplifying the deployment even beyond what it previously was in analog environments. So let me give an example of Edmonton Transit Services. So the challenge here was they had quite an aging analog environment, right? Where they had the public view monitor at different stations across the city. So in this case, we're going to talk about Churchill Station. And then they had everything being coordinated at their university. I'm sorry, the Churchill Station was the control center, and then University Station was the example for the location where they installed the public view monitor. They had a problem where line of sight was a challenge. They had some stairwells that were closed off with a lot of blind spots. The older analog equipment was failing, so they didn't have the opportunity to run video out to where they previously had those spot monitors. Some challenges were the additional hardware costs and cabling that were involved in rerunning a lot of that. And then, of course, maintenance concerns, where you're always having to send out technicians to these sites across the city. And then, of course, trying to control what cameras are displayed where in that older environment was difficult. So when they moved over to the IP solution, where they're already managing all the devices, all the the newer IP devices through Genetec Security Center, they still needed a way to display that relevant data. So that's where the solution came in, where they could hang the monitor. They didn't need to hang any additional PCs that provided additional security faults, required a lot of updating and maintenance. And they could maintain a high level of control over the monitors that they were displaying. So what they ended up getting, again, was this IP spot monitor. They were able to remotely manage the solution over the network. They were able to increase the access to the video. So in case a particular camera had some issue, they could switch to a different camera remotely and maintain that public safety. The public maintained that feeling of safety within their facility, whether it was a stairwell, escalator, or other blind spots. They were able to maintain and do a slow transition of the analog to IP solution, because they were able to maintain the equipment that they had while remotely switching over slowly. And then they were able to reduce the amount of on-site technical support that was required, because the on-site configuration was, number one, simplified, but they also had that remote capability of managing what the monitor was displaying, which cameras, what the layout was, things like that. So our contact there, had a wonderful comment for us, basically saying that the Genetec EIZO team, the main benefit here was the fact that it all came together to make their customers feel safer, and it also reduced the maintenance staff, where they could focus on larger, bigger issues like the full transition from analog to IP, but yet they could do it in stages rather than, they could focus on that big project rather than continuously fixing things at sites. So let's talk a little bit more about how this all comes together. So by using the EIZO IP decoding displays with Genetec Security Center, users enjoy an elegant solution that reduces the installation time in the field by remotely managing the monitors through Security Center. The frequency of maintenance trips was reduced. The user's infrastructure became more complicated. A user's infrastructure become more complicated. A solution provides a user with a redundant solution that improves situational awareness. So in case cameras, specific portions of the network go down, our solution is directly connected in, so you can reroute and pull those cameras that you would still have. You can focus the operation to the information that they're needing to see, rather than the information that may not be necessarily relevant at that time. And we'll show a little bit more of that on future slides about event action and how this overall solution can push out the relevant information as it's needed. And then as situations require, whether it be weather related, large groups in different parts of the subway or your facility, this can adapt by being told what to display at a later time, or at a specific time when there's an issue needing to be displayed. So let's kind of give a little bit of a diagram of a conventional solution here. So as you see, with a conventional solution, you're really having, your camera, the network switch, and then the server managing all of this. But to run a PVM, typically you're going to need something out there that's going to process this video. So a computer or some other hardware piece that's connected to it, that's decoding and displaying that image. But then, of course, you always need to get that computed information out to the monitor. So Traditionally, people would have like a KVM extender, HDMI extenders, things like that. So there's always a level of complication in between the network and the monitor where the information is being displayed. This creates a lot of opportunity for failure, as well as a lot of opportunities for components to have technical issues. And then we'll look at basically our joint solution here, where we truly simplify the solution by eliminating a lot of that middle ground, because all the processing everything that's needed to receive those video, display that video, is built straight into the monitor. So you eliminate all the cable extenders, the computer needed to run it, because the monitor is directly into the network, directly being controlled through Genetec Security Center. So now we'll turn this over to Laurent to explain more about how this really all comes together.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So I think that was perfect explanation as to how this combined solution helps with deployment, but also on the user side to make the entire thing a lot simpler to manage. And here, I just wanted to give you a perspective, like the perspective from the security platform side. So Security Center here, our main security platform, is going to receive the camera streams, which are stored then on the main server of the VMS. And then video processing can also be done on the Genetec side, which means video analytics or any transcoding for mobile use, for example, you're going to do this on your main server. And then the configuration tool here is going to be used for central management of all the video devices. And then through that video wall plugin that we have developed with EIZO, then we're going to exchange video streams and push alarms to the video wall monitor that we have on the right-hand side. And I just also want to show you a quick video on how simple that is, right? We talked about ease of use and configuration. It is extremely straightforward. So as you can see here, we're using the Security Center application to manage the cameras. So we have the usual camera tree on the left, and then we can simply drag and drop, right? So the users can control the remote monitors by accessing them directly from their main platform or the client app. And all we have to do is drag and drop all the cameras into the monitoring tile within the EIZO layout, right? So we can see it appear right away on the remote video wall. And we can also see those different layouts on the top component here. So before going back into what kind of information, event to action and alarms and video that we can push to that solution, I'll let Brian talk a bit more about the IP decoding solutions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so as he said, we really leveraged that Security Center that so many users are familiar with, already know how to use. We just give them another way of simply deploying that and making that information where the information needs to be displayed. So let's show you what options are available to you. So first, the key points here is really the centralized control, where you can have, 50, 100, how many ever these IP monitors on the network, all controlled centrally from Security Center. All of these units are quite adaptive, where you can control the layout dynamically. You can control exactly what cameras are displayed. You can have those cameras pulled out, displayed. These are very dynamic devices in terms of the flexibility. They're just not sitting there displaying a single thing at all times. And then the way it was designed, it's actually quite secure, because we take advantage of not only HTTP, but HTTPS, as well as signed certificates between devices. So we can manage those higher security for government, DoD, banking, any of those more regulated markets. And the fact that it's the OS is an embedded device Also makes the maintenance a lot easier for this. As we saw in the previous slide, the install's quite clean. You know, literally just those two cables, power cable, network cable, and then everything else is really done remotely. So it cuts down the amount of time where you are up a ladder, trying to mount it and then configure it once it's up on the wall. These are things that are all done behind the scenes in most cases, where you're really just doing the cable connections and the physical mounting at the sites. So we have 4 products in this category. We have two levels, a 16 channel models and the 32 channel models. And this basically means how many streams can the device receive, decode, and display simultaneously. So in the 16 channel market, we have the 23 inch, the FDF 2304, as well as the 46 inch FDF 4627. In the 32 channel model, this one again, a little unique in the fact that we can actually power 2 monitors off of 1 decoder. So we have the DX0211, which is an external decoder that you can connect up to, say, 2 big old 55 or 85 inch video wall monitors. And then of course we have the 27 inch, which you can daisy chain a second monitor off of if you wanted to display onto 2 monitors rather than just 1. Ralph, if you want to explain a little more about how the unified platform brings it all together. Mute, please.
Sorry about that. Classic mute error. So the Genetec Unified Platform, we're looking at a combination of video management, access control, license plate recognition, but now our customers' operations are evolving and people are looking to do more with the data that they're ingesting, right? From the video side, but from all these different other sources. So let's look at the unified platform in a more traditional setting where we have this monitoring interface showing you videos, access control events, as well as communications with intercoms, right? So this is kind of in its simplest form, it means having this single pane of glass for all security operations. So as Brian said earlier, we can set up an event to action or a workflow that's going to send just the right amount of information from here, this unified interface, to the remote video walls so that people receive just the right information. So when there's an intruder that's detected, maybe through analytics that we have on the tile down here on the left side, we can send that event and display the right video so we can take action quickly, right? But unification is actually more than just security. In the last few years, we realized that we can do so much more than just empower security monitoring. Now that we're able to bring all this data together, we can think about automation, intelligence, how to help our customers be more efficient in their maintenance operations, or to keep track of their cybersecurity posture, or just enhance the public safety overall of the environment around them. So I said that video management, access control, ALPR, those are kind of the core systems when we look at this. But we have so many other things that we can connect, whether it's different applications, different ways of consuming the information, or all these sensors coming from building management systems, maybe some temperature sensors, elevator dispatch systems, or even gunshot detection sensors. All of this can be ingested and managed through the same platform. And then we're going to decide what makes sense for that operator using the video wall and send them the right information. So what if we could use all that security data to do other things, right? Rather than just looking at cameras. And this is just to, get some ideas going. And I wanted to share a couple of different use cases that we're seeing more and more today. For example, people will be tracking flow and occupancy, right, in buildings or different areas where we can count the daily activity in and out, in entrances or exits. We can just raise an alarm if a threshold is reached, so that whenever the occupancy reaches that level, I want someone to take action. Or if a queue is full, I want to do something about it. So we're getting more in the operations here, or the business intelligence of the organization. And again, we're using the same data, right? We're leveraging cameras that are existing. They're already deployed out there. And with those cameras, we can also improve traffic and parking operations. Here we have a what's becoming more and more common, to centralize all the traffic management into that platform as well. So we can see a map, traffic information, some accidents or other incidents. And then we can even manage the display message, the dynamic message signs here. We can push out travel time information, road closure, and all sorts of information, right? And then if we look more at the public safety side, this is an application that we have that will allow you to correlate all the information during a specific event. And then you can manage kind of the radius that you want to be looking at. So if a certain event happened, I want to dispatch the police officers as quickly as possible, and they need to have the relevant information. So this is, again, a bit further than what we were discussing in more traditional fixed operation. But just keep in mind that these can go together. You can have someone at a remote location looking at the video wall, receiving the information about a critical incident, and then again, dispatching the information to the officers that are on the move. And then we can think about maintenance. I mentioned that we can keep track of cybersecurity posture. Well, we can give you a score that's going to check the hardening guide and the steps that you followed in the system to make sure that everything's secure and up to date. You can see the firmware status, all the cameras, which ones are down or need an update. So this can be all centralized. But how do we actually act on that information, right? So video, of course, is a core component still in all these deployments I showed. But there's so much data that can now be ingested in the same system and then correlated or verified with video images, right? So instead of wasting that precious data, we need to make sure that the information is distributed exactly where we need it to be. So how do we act on that precious data? That kind of brings us back to the joint offering. I know we went quite far here, and now we're back to the video wall operation, which is one of the best ways to consume video, right? We can use those sites to, again, simplify the operations, take advantage of that rich information, and then those remote monitors in the field for the guards or employees to quickly act on situations. So just think of situations where video needs to be propagated quickly. For example, I have a motion or intrusion detected from those analytics that we saw earlier. Well, we just need that camera that's showing a potential threat, right? So we're gonna display that video feed automatically on the video wall through the EIZO integration. And then we'll change the display color if that occupancy threshold is reached, or maybe a threat level has been triggered because there's an emergency situation. So we can also manage that through the integration. And then if we look more at the retail and banking scenario, we can display video feeds in emergency situations, or if there's maybe a full queue. So we want to show the video of that location and then maybe call in the employee room and say, hey, there's a full queue. We need to dispatch more people. So we can kind of reorganize reassign our resources and become more efficient. And then for transit systems or public safety applications, we could look, for example, if someone is loitering or there's a license plate match, we could make sure that we, again, display the video tied to that event, right? There's someone that shouldn't be there. There's a car that has been identified as a suspect. So you don't need kind of this mastermind in the background to analyze all the data. Here we're looking at the system that's doing most of the work through event to action workflows, through that automation, and just sending the right information, the right video to the video wall here. So we just want that message, that video feed, this alarm, and that's really going to help streamline operations. So to wrap it all with the joint solution again, why would you choose EIZO and Genetec as a common offering? Well, first, it is extremely simple to deploy and configure. As we saw earlier, the time and cost of installation is really reduced with that simplified offering, with all the hardware that we don't have to deal with, as Brian showed earlier. And then you can choose from a variety of supported displays, and also with the Genetec's open architecture approach. That means that you're never locked in with proprietary hardware. So for those cameras that you need to replace, you can just change as you go. You can add analytics on the edge, again, to empower that system later on. So that kind of applies to your entire architecture here. And it is safe. Cybersecurity is top of mind for both manufacturers, and we're really helping to provide cybersecurity by default. So you don't have to think about it too much. Well, of course, it needs to be top of mind for customers as well, but the more we can do by design out of the box, the better it's going to be. And finally, it's a seamless integration with video monitoring, but it's more than that, right? We want you to be able to improve collaboration, react quicker, make better decisions or more informed decisions, and then just get that global picture of your security in a very simplified way. And unification, we're not just talking about inputs, but experiences across devices. So your video wall, your command center, and your mobile and web apps, all of that is kind of the same experience, and everybody acts on the same information. So that brings us to the Q&A session already. We were quite efficient in our presentation, so leaves us plenty of time to answer any question.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was very informative, and we do have a couple of questions. So let me remind everyone, if you have a comment or question for Brian or Laurent, we'd love to hear it. And you just click on the Q&A symbol down at the bottom and type your question in, and we'll share that with them. So Brian, I think the first one is for you. The question is specific to EIZO. How many streams can be displayed on the monitor? And actually two parts. And the second part is, can the monitor support multiple sensor cameras?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. So we have the two series of products. We have a 16 channel, which means you can display up to 16 cameras at any time on those monitors, which would be the 46 and 23 inch. And we have a 32 channel option, which allows you to display 32 streams. So this could be 32 cameras or 32 streams from any source, really. So whether that's a camera source or another source coming specifically from Genetec. So when it comes to the multi-sensor, so a lot of times you'll have the multi-sensor camera, it'll show up as multiple instances where you can drag that specific sensor or that specific quadrant straight to the EIZO monitor and populate it that way, because each stream itself is considered as its own camera, and that way you can drop that specific stream. So it's however you set that up in Security Center, you just drop that onto our monitor and we will receive it and display it.
Great. So let me remind everyone, not only are we live through this Zoom webinar, we're also streaming live on Facebook. So if you have a question and you're watching live on Facebook, we'd love to entertain your question here as well. We have someone monitoring our Facebook page. So if you go ahead and ask your question, we'll get it to the right person. So this next question is maybe for both of you guys. So it's solution specific. And the question is, during the presentation, you mentioned the ability to remotely troubleshoot issues with monitors deployed remotely. What types of issues can be fixed remotely?
Well, Laurent, if I can take the first stab. And so the monitor essentially is just an IP device on the edge. So similar to a camera, you can access all of its settings and all of its functionalities remotely. So whether you're using the unit's its own web page or accessing it through config tool, you can set up the monitor's network settings, specific settings for what kind of codec you want to decode and display. So pretty much any of the functions of the monitor. You can also see where any of the errors may be coming through by pulling out troubleshooting and bug fix, or I'm sorry, not bug fix, error codes to see which error codes are being displayed. So you can pull all this data remotely from either the web page or through Genetec, whichever platform is more comfortable.
That's right. And if I can add to this, I think the big benefit of this open architecture solution is that we're working very closely with partners to get that deep native integration to really support not only control and management of those devices, but also maintenance and troubleshooting. So we can do the same with all the video devices, all the cameras from different manufacturers. We can use that central point of management, of maintenance. I showed a maintenance dashboard earlier. We can centralize all that information. Then we can see if something's out of date, there's a critical update to be done, so we're not left vulnerable. And if something is down, right, my video wall or my camera, if there's something wrong with those devices, I can just look at it from on this centralized list. So.
Very good. So I think we have another question. This one seems to be geared towards you, Laurent, and Genetec. So are the events and alarms generated by the security platform limited to what was showed during the presentation?
Yeah, that's a good one, because there was only so many events I could put on a slide, right? And I could spend a lot of time talking about different use cases and all those events or event to action that we could set up, but there's virtually no limit as long as we can ingest the data. And we're supporting thousands of different sensors now within the platform, and not just cameras, all types of IoT sensors. So if you can think of an entry point of an input where we can retrieve that information, that sensors tells us that something has happened, then we can create that workflow, whether it's through a simple event to action, triggering an alarm, then it's going to be supported within the solution you just saw, as long as there's an event or an alarm. And then if we want to go a step further, we can add SOPs or workflows in the picture. So rather than being just a one-to-one or one-to-multiple, we can have conditions as to what happens when, right? So if, for example, this camera's down, and then I'm gonna verify the camera feed, and okay, it just seems like the camera's moved, then I can take action right away to send a technician. But if it's actually something that there was tampering done on the device, then I'm going to act differently and then maybe send that information to the video wall automatically, right? So I'm going to send that feed that, hey, someone put something over the camera, it's obstructed, there's potentially an intruder, so we need to act quickly. So I could go on and all those different use cases, but there's so many more things we can do in terms of events and alarms.
Great. So we have time for at least one more question. If someone has a question, please go ahead and enter it in the Q&A box down at the bottom. Gentlemen, while we're waiting to see if there's any more questions, I just want to say thank you, Brian and Laurent, both EIZO and Genetec. Not only is the technology impressive, but the fact that the two manufacturers have come together and are working together and collaborating together is also impressive to deliver solutions to integrators throughout the world. So congratulations on that. Doesn't look like we have any more questions, so we're going to wrap things up. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. You'll get a link to the recording in an email tomorrow, and we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.